Just give a minute or two and then we'll start, inshallah. Okay. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. My dear brothers and sisters, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. And a good day to all of you joining us from different parts of the world. On behalf of Bahrain Institute of Banking and Finance, I warmly welcome you all to our monthly talk number 6 for the year 2025. This is part of our Islamic Finance Talk series. Bahrain Institute of Banking and Finance is the training arm of the Central Bank of Bahrain. As the premier provider of financial education and training in the region, we provide education in business and finance through undergraduate and postgraduate degree programs, professional qualifications, as well as our own qualifications, including short training programs. These are provided through 6 centers of excellence that we have here at BIBF. These include Banking and Finance Center, Islamic Finance Center, Insurance Center, Leadership and Management Center, Digital and Transformation and Project Management, and we have an academic wing for our degree programs. When it comes to Islamic finance, we are working with global stakeholders as their capacity building partners within the Islamic finance space. We have specialized certification programs and executive management programs, including the Cambridge Islamic Finance Leadership Program, hosted at Cambridge University, although an independent program of the university, as well as many other executive management programs. For more information about BIBF and the training programs that we offer, please visit our website, www.bibf.com. My name is Dr. Rizwan Malik. I head up the Islamic Finance Center here at BIBF. We are proud to host this Islamic Finance Talk series to discuss important issues and emerging topics within the global Islamic economics, banking, and finance landscape. The aim through these talks or monthly talks is to foster meaningful dialogue, facilitate exchange of knowledge, and explore evolving landscape of the industry. The idea through these talks is to inspire innovation, promote best practices, and contribute to the sustainable development of the Islamic finance industry. We're very thankful and honored to have distinguished guests as speakers who share their deep knowledge and expertise on various topics, both that are in fashion or those that need attention for or need discussion for this within the Islamic banking and finance industry. Today's talk is on one of the most important area. In fact, it's an area that, we've become so much accustomed to it that we don't even realize using it, and that is the area of AI or artificial intelligence. It is my great pleasure to welcome you all to this highly anticipated webinar It's titled Decoding Artificial Intelligence from the Lens of Sharia. It's a topic that is very, very important. And we are very honored to have a very distinguished speaker with us to deliver an inspiring talk on it. Through this talk, we are going to cover, we'll start from basic, what is artificial intelligence, how it is being used, what are the risks of AI, how do we understand robots from Sharia perspective, and what differentiates human beings from AI, as well as the Sharia principles in building artificial intelligence systems and the governance that is required from a Sharia perspective to govern AI. Alhamdulillah, we had an overwhelming numbers of registration for this virtual event. And the good news for everybody is that this session is being recorded and it will be made available on BIBF's YouTube channel for your reference later on. Again, we are very honored to have Mufti Faraz Adam, our speaker for today, who is delivering second time this year. Very, very honored to have Mufti Faraz deliver this Islamic finance talk second time in 2025. Mufti Faraz Adam, although he doesn't really need any introduction, but is a distinguished leader in the Islamic finance industry, bringing nearly 15 years of extensive experience across global markets. As the CEO of Amanah Advisors, a leading Sharia advisory firm based in the UK, he has made significant contributions to the field, particularly in the areas of Islamic finance and fintech. Mufti Faraz is known for his proactive research and advisory roles in emerging sectors, including Web3 initiatives, where he has been instrumental in bridging traditional Islamic finance principles with modern technological advancements. In 2019, he authored a groundbreaking book on Islamic fintech, which has been influential in shaping the discourse on the integration of Islamic finance within the digital economy. In 2023, he joined Fasset as a Sharia advisor, where he focuses on developing Sharia-compliant tokenization solutions, further demonstrating his commitment to innovation in the financial sector. Mufti Faraz delivered, tokenization and Islamic finance session earlier this year for BIBF, which is available on YouTube channel. Please refer to it. It was an enlightening session and very useful for people who are trying to get their grips on tokenization with reference to Islamic finance. Currently, Mufti Faraz is pursuing a PhD. MashaAllah, Mufti Adam is dedicated to advancing the field of Islamic finance by developing a comprehensive Sharia governance framework for artificial intelligence. His work not only highlights his expertise, but also underscores his vision for a future where Islamic finance and technology coexist, creating ethical and inclusive financial solutions for the community. MashaAllah, very well read, and my favorite LinkedIn personality as well. I look up to the social media posts that he put up, which aims to provide a very strong reminder to some of the things that we take for granted. We are very honored to have you, Mufti Faraz, with us. Thank you very much for spending your time. This is a topic of your research as you're pursuing your PhD. So we are all ears, inshallah, and looking forward to hearing or sharing or hearing your thoughts and, very kind of you sharing your knowledge with us through this platform. Before I go away, I just want to highlight that the chat most likely, I think, is disabled. Chat option is disabled in the on this window, but you are more than welcome to put in your questions in the Q&A tab if you have, and we will come to them, inshallah, toward the end of the session. We have also disabled the audio and video just to ensure there is no disturbance. However, if you have to ask any questions during the if you have any questions and you wish to ask by voice, please raise your hand, and inshallah, if time permits, we will come to that later on and allow you to ask the question by voice as well. So with that, I hand it over to Mufti Faraz to take us forward. Inshallah, Jazakumullah khair for once again for sparing your time, and inshallah, we were looking forward to this very beneficial session, inshallah.
Thank you very much. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with the BIBF, and I'd like to congratulate them and thank them for inviting me, and congratulate them on all the hard work they've been doing in advancing capacity building raising awareness, education on different topics. I mean, if you look at their monthly series that they've been running, it's phenomenal to be able to network the world in presenting, discussing, and collaborating in the cutting edge of knowledge at the moment. So hats off to yourselves, and I make dua that Allah, grants you more barakah and takes more work from you and allows you to increase your reach and resources to impact even more lives. And I'd like to thank Dr. Rizwan personally as a very good personal friend of mine, all the work he's doing, and I look forward to many more collaborations with him and learning from him because he really has a lot to offer. Not just introducing myself, but really he has much more to offer. And hopefully, once me and him will be on a webinar together, having a very enlightening discussion. But yeah, this particular session on artificial intelligence, it is something that I've been looking at for the last 2 3 years now as part of my PhD program, where I've been asking the very difficult questions on if we have a humanoid tomorrow or a robot tomorrow, how do we understand that? How do we, one is from a Sharia lens, but just from a human perspective in the world. But for that is, from a Muslim perspective, the Sharia will guide us on how to engage with these things. What are the benefits? What are the harms? What are the liabilities? What are the responsibilities? What laws apply? I mean, this, for, not only is it a fiqh question, the discussion on artificial intelligence goes down to theology. And that's why it's really complicated. It's not only about rules here. It's almost as though we are rethinking or at least questioning so many things that we thought were once set in stone. For instance, is the question aqal, what we know in Arabic as aqal, is that something restricted and refined to humans? How do we understand aqal? So these are very philosophical, theological questions, which form part of my thesis and research, and trying to understand if you had sentient AI, what would that mean? What does it mean for the world? What does it mean for human beings? How do we engage with these things? Hence, my research has been from an Islamic lens, from a Sharia lens, and from Islamic theology lens, just to be able to grapple with this potential reality which so many practitioners, experts, enthusiasts have been all predicting that the trajectory of AI, as we'll see, is going in one direction. But what does it mean for us? What we need to do is be able to understand the risks before those risks emerge. One of the most amazing things about the classical jurists and the classical fuqaha was that not only did they solve a problem before the problem was initiated and before the problem manifested, they presented solutions to problems that had not yet manifested. This was the amazing legacy of our scholars classically. So the Hanafi scholars are well known for this. They would create problems that did not exist. They would discuss solutions for that theoretical problem, and then they will find the solution for a problem not even existing, so that in their books today, in the books 1,200 years ago, they have answers to questions which potentially manifested 300 years later or 500 years later. And that's the work that all of us have to do. It's not just about answering what's happened and what's in the past. It's about understanding the legacy that we have and really pushing ourselves to understand the next 100 years. That's how knowledge is passed on. That's where the enjoyment of knowledge is gained. That's when you're really engaging with the legacy that we have. Hence, in this particular presentation, as we'll shortly discuss, and as I'm loading onto my slides and on my screen, this is a conversation. The conversation is all about understanding artificial intelligence from a Sharia lens. How do we understand this? What is it? And then how do we understand it? So the first thing I just want to really highlight is we're literally living in a revolution at the moment. Or you can call it an evolution if you want, but really it's a revolution. It's not even an evolution. It's really a revolution in the sense that the world is changing rapidly. And if we look at the revolutions that have occurred over the last 4 or 5 centuries, if you look at mechanization and the steam engine, how that changed the world in terms of transportation, in labor, in scaling work, productivity, output, the world changed. And that's what we can call in the like near past as industry 1.0, where the world changed in the late 18th century with the introduction of the steam engine. It created what we know as the industrial revolution. Then we have another phase in the world which goes back to the creation and the mass deployment of electricity. How that changed the assembly lines in factories, how it changed homes, how it changed the lighting, everything around you was impacted by electricity. But the people living at that time, they were not aware they were living in a particular revolution. Likewise, in the steam engine revolution, the people living at the time, they were not aware that what they're going through will be in the books of history, and it'll be deemed as a change and as a pivot and as a moment by which humanity changes its course. And hence, and thereafter, Industry 3.0 comes, where we see the rise of computers just after the World War II, and where computers existed, but then for it to be deployed and started to be used by institutions in the 50s, 60s, that's when the world changed again dramatically. Although computers at those times were very different to the computers that we have today, but yet now you had this. At that time, they thought of it as robots. They literally thought of computers as robots. And nobody would call a computer a robot today. The way we understand robots are far more sophisticated. But at that time, it was something unique. Like, here's something which has text on it, which is you can delete the text, you can have the text, you can send the text, you can save the text. It was something beyond imagination. You have a tool now which is not pen and paper. You have something else. And then that flourished and grew, and you had 4.0, where the internet came about in the 80s. And the internet has been a revolution across the world. The connectivity, every kind of technology that we have today, we sitting here today discussing, we're all impacted by the internet. The internet has changed how the world operates. The internet has been like the glue of globalization. Without the internet, a lot of the things that we're doing today would not be possible, and perhaps would be very siloed entities or siloed communities living in different areas without a clue of what's happening in the other part. So the internet has really revolutionized and changed the face of the world. And then now comes AI. In the last decade, we've seen how artificial intelligence has really started to change the course of humanity. Just the few technologies that we've seen from artificial intelligence, or the few programs that we've been experimenting with and engaging with, we can already see so many forms of change in different lines of work. We've already seen how the experts are already talking about what's to come potentially, and how many possible job losses there could be, and how many things can change over the next couple of decades. So we're in the midst of a wave. We're in the midst of a wave. Perhaps we're at the very beginning part of that wave. But what's to come? There's so much to come, and before that comes, we need to be well versed from every perspective to deal with that. Hence, the question then is, what is actually artificial intelligence? How do we understand AI in simple terms? I don't want to go extremely technical into the kind of like mathematics of this, because it'll bore everybody, right? I just want to be able to give you enough to understand what's actually happening with artificial intelligence. How does it actually work? And so, if you were to explain AI in its simplest form, it's about building applications that can perform tasks without human intervention. You're building applications, You're deploying different programs without human intervention. The ideas of autonomy to carry out operations independently. That's the idea of AI. That's what we are really, in a simple concept, that's what we're dealing with, where there's autonomy in operations, autonomy in execution, autonomy in delivering. Now you have this thing called agentic AI that's being developed and deployed by so many different firms, and it's being explored and it's being shared. Where we're already seeing this. We're in a meeting, and you're having people make their note takers join the meeting. They're making notes for you. And this will only increase. Perhaps a time will come when nobody will even attend these types of like sessions. You just have a bunch of AI agents on your behalf. Attend, take all the good parts, summarize it for you and give it to you. And even perhaps explain it to you in a better way. But that's the way the world is going. And how does AI work then? Like if we're looking at AI and we're looking at this big kind of piece, because AI is a global umbrella term. It has so many different parts within it. And that's why you have machine learning that comes in, you have neural networks, deep learning, you have classical algorithms, you have all these things going on within artificial intelligence. And the subsets of AI are many, but we're just focusing on what's on the screen. So with artificial intelligence, what's actually happening is there's algorithms that are running in the background. These are just processes which are run or scripted in code. So you have Python, Java, and these things. These algorithms are embedded within that code and this programmable language. And this programming language is then powered by hardware that's in the computers. That's what's happening. So the software is being powered by hardware, and that software is executing the algorithms, which is executing what we see in a nutshell. So, for instance, you go on a website today and they'll have a chatbot. That chatbot is a form of artificial intelligence. It might not be a deep learning kind of model, or it might just be simple machine learning where it's very basic and straightforward and it's a classical type of algorithm. But when you ask a question, for instance, you go on a website and you say, you know, do you have, I want to speak to the customer service. That's what you put into the chatbot. The chatbot, the way the algorithm works is based on pattern detection or word detection. It looks at the words placed and it'll see, oh, you've put these words in, and they'll be pre-programmed and pre-trained relationships and pre-trained prompts or pre-trained outcomes and results. So when it sees these words, it knows that, okay, if it's like a linear relationship, if this is the case, then this is the outcome. If you're asking for customer service, this is the outcome. And these chatbots, which are on websites, they can't do anything more than that. They'll just keep repeating the same thing over and over again because they've been trained in that particular way. There's no new deep, like neural networks running behind the scene, or these deep learning um, technology running behind in the back end. So that's what a chatbot is, a very simple, straightforward. So when with AI, then it's all about mathematical and computational models. That's what is driving the back end. And they're based on probability and statistics. That's what artificial intelligence is all about. If you try to like drill down to its kind of like mechanics, and this statistical kind of like pattern recognition, it enables the model to take data, understand the data, or understand in a sense, not really understand, but be able to sort the data, interpret the data, learn patterns from that data, and give you an outcome which makes sense to us, not to it, but to us. And thus, through that kind of process, is simulating human intelligence, where it's just getting data, the data, where, for instance, in generative AI, like ChatGPT, for instance, it's generative AI. It's generating text and content. We're putting words therein, but those words are then transformed into numbers because numbers is the language of computers. Thereafter, it goes through an entire process, but the net result is based on probability. It's just guessing and the most likely guess. Now, what's the next word? What should it say? Because you've given it words. which were translated into numbers. Then it looks at which other words are similar and close to the numbers that have been presented to me. And then it gives you a result based on that. So there's no understanding inherently. There's no understanding. Rather, it's about probability and understanding the patterns that exist between words that have been presented. Machine learning, so if that's AI overall about this, and as you mentioned, it's just about autonomous outputs, autonomous presentations based on statistics and probability. Machine learning being a subset is where a computer is now learning patterns from data to make decisions. But with machine learning, it still needs humans. It needs humans to tell it which information to focus on. It needs humans to train it. There's always a training that's involved. What's the training? Well, in machine learning, typically you have what's known as structured data, which is labeled data. In that you might have pictures of mouses and cats, or mice and cats, right? You might have pictures of mice and cats, and the mice will have, like, it'll be labeled as a mouse, and the cat will be labeled as a cat. And he uses those labels to form decisions on future pictures or other things which come into it to label it as a cat or a mouse, because it's relying upon its trained data and its kind of intelligence within it. That's it. If you throw in a picture of a mouse or a cat which doesn't resemble the training data at all, it will hallucinate, it will not give you the response. That's how machine learning is. And this is a difference between deep learning, where in deep learning, you're not only giving it labeled, rather you can give it unstructured data. But what happens is, in here, the AI and the model is trained to do pattern recognition. So instead of looking at labels and making decisions and outcomes on the picture with the label, rather the model is trained to identify patterns. And it's done millions of times. This happens hundreds and thousands of times of like epochs or continuous kind of like trainings. And what happens is, over time, the model will learn, and there's some detail in that, how it's doing that. But over time, it'll get better at predicting, because it'll be told that you are wrong here. There's feedback as well that's going on. But over time, what's known as a loss function, by the way, over time, it'll come to a conclusion, or it'll come to this realization that these are all the patterns which are associated with a cat. These are all the points which are associated with a mouse. And then based on that information, which is held in this model, when you place a picture, or you prompt a model and say, what is this? It'll go through a pattern recognition exercise, and it'll tell you that this is a cat or this is a mouse. That's what's actually happening in AI. So your neural networks, your deep learning, is just a sophisticated way of processing information and data. That's all it is. And it's happening in a very, very sophisticated way. It's not a simple thing. The amount of training, the amount of data, these are libraries full of information there. Millions of uh, books and data is consumed to be able to understand what's going on. And so neural networks and deep learning is just what we're experiencing today. What we're engaging with today, it's really neural networks and deep learning, where the models are going through multiple forms of training, and they have a series of layers between. When we input data and then when there's an output, there's a series of layers which that prompt goes through to be able to come out with an answer and a solution. But that is AI in a nutshell. And that's why I like to, whenever discussing AI, just think of it in a simple way. It's simulated intelligence or machine intelligence. That's all, because the word artificial, like in my thesis, have a chapter on just understanding what is AI. And the first question is raised, what is artificial? What do we actually mean by even artificial? Artificial in what sense? Because there's an assumption there that anything non-human is artificial when we're talking about intelligence. So then how do we understand this then? It's just simulated intelligence. It's intelligence which is not what we know as, it's simulated in the sense of data, as AI has no understanding. Artificial intelligence that we have, it has no understanding or awareness. It doesn't know or understand the words it's relaying to us. All it's doing is giving us outputs based on patterns that it's recognized. But it doesn't understand the words itself. It's only doing pattern recognition. Likewise, the AI doesn't mean anything it's saying. So you can ask the AI, uh, would you like to go here? Would you like to do this? Would you like to do that? It doesn't mean anything. It's just using its database and the model that it's been trained on and giving you based on this mathematical operation is giving you an answer. But it doesn't mean or intend anything it's saying whatsoever. There's no consciousness or self-awareness with AI. It doesn't it's not it doesn't it's not sentient. It's not self-aware. It doesn't understand itself, or it's not subject. It doesn't have experiences like human beings do. And therefore it's not driven by truth, rather it's driven by probabilities. That's all. For that is the mode of artificial intelligence. It's just based on maths. What's the most probable is what the answer is. Now that can be a complete lie. It can be an absolute lie. But for it, it's just working through its algorithms, it's working through its kind of end-to-end process and coming with an answer, and that can be an absolute lie. But for it, it's done its job. It's given you a probable answer. It's not there to give you the truth always. So because in some instances, the truth might be the way it's been trained and coded with the data it has, unlikely. It can be you can have uh, manipulated data. There could be biases in your data, and you fed it incorrect data. It'll give you, based on its data, what it's understood to give you that outcome, even though it might not be the truth. So this is one of the issues when we're speaking about artificial intelligence. Now, this picture on your screen, the whole thing about neural networks, and this is just again, I don't want to go extremely technical, but just to understand how much we rely on human beings. Everything that we have today around us, the technology, you'll find potentially some connection with the creation of Allah. It's like we're always taking inspiration from the creation of Allah without recognizing Allah and understanding that, look, if we're so wowed and so amazed by a node, a node in a neural network, how come we're not amazed by the cells and the neurons that exist in our brains? It's just phenomenal because the entire AI kind of modeling and everything in artificial intelligence works on, at a granular level, these nodes. They are putting everything together. Data or and maths and numbers are passing through these nodes. They are the ones which are giving an output and doing the mathematical operations. It's all happening within these nodes. Now, if that's the case and we're so amazed by that, how amazed should we be then by what's in our bodies and is happening at a microscopic level with phenomenal kind of like outputs. We see an entire human being functioning, but this is what the nuts and bolts is based on, these cells. So even in our neurons that we have in our bodies, they work in a similar way. There's an electrical stimulus. We have this kind of uh, we have electricity running within us. We're bioelectric beings. So just like the neural network, the way it functions is based on information passing through. And if a node, for instance, based on its weights and biases, the result might be zero. That node doesn't power any information forward. And if a neural network was deemed to be this kind of like process-based system and engine, if node the result was zero based on the mathematical operation and computation, then it just switches off. It doesn't do anything. In the same manner, our neurons in our brains is a similar kind of thing, where it passes on signals to the next node or to the next neuron and the next neuron and the next neuron. That's why this is an amazing kind of tech thing for us to ponder over and understand how Allah has created our minds and how it all works, and how Allah has designed us, and how the technology today, like we have aeroplanes designed, it has, replicates or has familiarity with birds, how birds operate. And there's so many things in the world that we have today which reflects a natural kind of creation of Allah. And that's something for us to take away as individuals. But nevertheless, in this node, if this node and neuron that we're talking about, just to give you a summary and overview of what's actually happening, it's like it's like a calculator. Okay, it takes inputs. That's the data that you have. The data is really tokenized. Tokenized in this instance, what it means in tokenization in digital assets is something different. Tokenization in artificial intelligence is something different. When we're talking about tokenization and creating tokens here, we're breaking down words into smaller units in parts, and that is then given a number. So there's vectors, there's a series of numbers, and you can have a words broken down and put into numbers. So these nodes, they receive these inputs. Then when the information is gone through there's in this kind of like there's a formula up here, and there's a mathematical kind of like equation operating where we're looking at the weight, and a weight is simply like a value which the neural network has learned over time to understand how important something is and how correct something is. That's what it's about, your bias and your weights. Is this particular thing, how we want to, should this neuron or should this node send information to the next layer or not? That's what we want to understand. That's the key question when information is processed at this level. Should this node pass information forward, yes or no? How is that understood? There's two more questions then. Should this particular neuron activate or not? And how strong should the signal be? So every node and every small kind of like, you can say, neuron is functioning and processing is these questions. That if should this be activated or not? If it's activated, it'll pass on information forward, and this information is passed over and over and over again until it's refined and comes to its final output. So that's the that's one of the things that are happening here. Okay, at a very kind of like a micro level, and this is something which people still until now, how it's all happening is extremely technical from a mathematical perspective. Even how how it adjusts its own weights is still not clear. But these are things which is based on continuous training and the use of a loss function, which is like giving a report and feedback to the model on what's right and what's wrong. And this is just the kind of like a very basic, if you were to simplify what's actually happening in a neural network, you have these layers in between. You have data being fed into the input layer, and at each node, every circle is a node. At each node, it's simply taking on whatever it's received, it's putting it through its mathematical equation, and if there's a result larger than zero, it's more than zero, then it tells you it's likely that it'll pass the information forward depending on how strong it is. Then which node passes on what information depends on its number and output based on the maths. And remember, those numbers are representing words. So you have this thing where you have words represented by numbers, maths is going on in between, and then based on the output and the answer within that equation, depending on the number, whether it's 10, 20, 30, that tells you how strong this data and information is, and that it should be passed on. Then you get a result at the end, and that is then put back as your output layer in words again. It's decoded into words. So that's literally what's happening inside of an AI model. It's this sophisticated kind of process to understand words. And there'll be we'll go through an example shortly to make this more real and less abstract. Now, the next thing I just want to highlight is the kind of like future, perhaps, right? Or what the discussions are in the current industry and the different experts across the world when talking about AI. What are some of the risks? What could happen? What's the trajectory? And this is one of the things I've been focusing on in my own thesis is what are industry experts saying? What are they predicting? What's the data? What's the data like? I've done an entire literature review on this point where there's just been so many different surveys of experts in the AI space and how are they understanding the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years. And so what you'll typically see in these types of discussions is the presentation of three waves. You have what's known as the ANI, which is what we're experiencing right now, the artificial narrow intelligence, where AI is simply good at doing one task. So autonomous driving, or ChatGPT, generating text or images, just generative stuff. That's all it's good at, nothing else. It's good in generation. Then, whilst that's there, it's not good in anything else. It can't do anything beyond its remit. What it was trained to do and what its model was designed for, it's focused on that one thing only. The model is restricted to that one thing. It can't do anything beyond that. That's ANI. Then you have something called AGI, which is what many practitioners, thought leaders are speaking about, that will come to a stage perhaps in the very near future where AI will no longer be restricted. You'll have an AI model which will be better at humans in all of its daily tasks, or will be capable, not even better rather, but capable like humans in every single task. Whatever humans can do, it can do. It can learn, it can drive, it can do everything. And that's when we start thinking about these humanoids and robots, that you have something or a model which can, based on its kind of modeling and training, it has an output very similar to, equivalent to human beings. So all our tasks, whether that's driving, whether that's flying a plane, whether that's operating trains, whether it's just simply doing delivery jobs, anything. If you think about it, it'll be it'll be as good as a human being. It can do anything. It'll understand, if understanding if what I mean by understanding here is based on its mathematical modeling, it'll be able to grapple with the task at hand and do it like a human does, whatever you throw at it. Now, if that kind of model is embedded within a robot, that's when the thing gets blurry. The lines get blurry now. Because you have a robot now who can operate like a human being in anything, in everything that humans do, whether it's construction, whether it's something else. It can do anything. It can do building work, put it on an assembly line. You can, you know, whatever task a human does today, it can do. Work in an office, take phone calls, work in stores. There's so many things that you can use this robot for. That's one stage. That's the next stage, perhaps. Some researchers have put in a stage in between ANI and AGI, right? Like Mustafa Suleiman in his Coming Wave. In his books, A Coming Wave, he discusses an interim kind of like phase, which we will go to before AGI. And to be honest, it's like when is AGI reached? It's not like a, a hard benchmark. It's something which will naturally come. So you can't put a hard line that this is AGI, because even the definition of AGI it differs amongst people. But the idea is that we'll have something very similar to human beings. And then you have ASI. ASI is like this thing that people are worried about and scared of the most, where you have this intelligence which is far better than human beings in every task. How do we grapple with that? How do we understand that? How do humans deal with it? Will it see humans as a threat? Because now this is better than human beings in everything. It surpasses human beings. And that's really where the concerns and risks are. For instance, if you look at these, like Jeffrey Hinton, one of the most famous individuals in the AI space, what did he say? He says, look, the field is moving into a phase where AI systems may be more intelligent than we currently comprehend. Elon Musk, as we know, AI is one of the biggest threats to humanity. Others have said, look, AI is the most existential debate and challenge humanity will ever face. It's greater than climate change and nuclear weapons combined. Because the threat that AI poses. Look, what does Salman Altman say? When I read this for the first time, I had to read it 2-3 times just to be able to digest what he's saying and what he's thinking. AI will probably most likely lead to the end of the world. But in the meantime, there'll be great companies. That's what he mentioned. So the people who are working on AI day to day, they're seeing the trajectory. They know potentially the harms of this, the risks. If this goes, look, right now AI is centralized. The models are centralized. They're with big companies. And it's not open source for everybody to build anything and everything. Sooner or later, like everything, you're going to have all of this open source. It'll be available to any person. Now that is where the worry is, because any person can design anything and do anything with this. And so there has to be things in place to restrict, or a governance in place, who gets what and how they utilize AI. Some have mentioned, for instance, AI risk must be treated with the same seriousness as the climate crisis. Warned of this, Nick Bostrom, right? Warned of AI's potential to initiate an intelligence explosion where machines improve themselves recursively, eventually becoming vastly more capable than humans in all domains. That was back 10 years ago. But we're seeing that now. In terms of regulation and governance agency, yeah, this is the Mustafa Suleiman. He mentioned, look, advocating treating frontier AI models without the same legal restrictions as hazardous substances like nuclear material or anthrax. That's how we should be treating them. This is hazardous. That this technology can really harm in the long term and can spiral out of control. So those who are working in the front lines of AI have spelled out great worry and concern of what the potential of AI is. There was one study done recently. 2,778 AI researchers were surveyed. These are experts in their field. And they were asked, okay, when do you think this AGI will come, ASI will come? They were predicting by 2047. It's 25 years. This 50% chance of AI outperforms humans in all tasks. That's one. 10% chance of human level AI by 2027, your AGI. 2027, just 2 years. So the AI researchers are looking at things now, and even if you look at, for instance, ChatGPT, which everybody knows, when 3 came, 3.5, 4, 4.5, and now when 5 will come. As every model has been released, the timeline and the window between each model has decreased. That's just showing you at the pace of these things. And if you wanted to understand how much resources are being um, utilized in creating these models, that's when you'll truly understand the scale of things. The scale of things, it's phenomenal. But look, from a Sharia perspective, enough of the AI stuff. From a Sharia perspective, how do we understand AI? That's the biggest question. Like, what is AI from a Sharia perspective? The most fundamental question is about aql. If today we're looking at AI, do we understand AI and from an Islamic lens? This is purely an Islamic lens now. What we believe and know as truth, and what we see the world, our worldview is based upon. So the first and the most important discussion revolves around the concept of aql. Aql is translated as intelligence, But the reason why I don't want to use intelligence in this conversation is because we'll confuse it with artificial intelligence, right? But aql is far more encompassing. So if you look at the classical scholars like Imam Ghazali, Sarakhsi, Imam Bukhari, Bukhari as in the Hanafi scholar who wrote Kashf al-Asrar, and others, when they talk about or when they talk about aql, for our classical scholars, for the most part, many or majority of them define aql not in the sense of being able to do maths or being able to solve a problem in the world. Aql is a light which is embedded in the hearts of humans or in the souls to be able to recognize Allah. The entire purpose of aql, as far as Islamic literature is concerned and our kind of theology is concerned, is to become aware of Allah and recognize Allah. So the aql's primary function is being able to analyze. That's why we have the skill of analysis. We can retrospect, we can review, we have this ability because this function that Allah has put within aql is there for us to utilize by observing the natural world and observing the world to be able to come to a conclusion without even needing revelation. A human being, if he uses his mind and he rationalizes and he looks and he sees, he should be able to come to the conclusion that for sure that this earth can't be you know and it can't be created on its own accord. It has to have a creator. It can't have been made by itself. It can't just be random, because you've had so many things that have had to happen with perfection, with no room for error, like hundreds of things in alignment, one after the other, for the world to come today. And if that's the case, then how can it be where there's like 1 billionth, 1 trillionth of a chance? How can it be that it's occurred? Because we never see that kind of thing happening in the earth. So how can it be that this entire cosmos has come based on that many factors being involved? So the role of aql classically is not to, it's not about being clever or intelligent or being able to do maths or to write sentences. Aql was never part of that. But we can do all of that because the role of aql is to be able to reason, to be able to put different concepts together and to be able to understand the larger picture. And that's as a result of that kind of faculty, we're able to do everything else. Allah has taught us everything else just for that purpose. But that's the kind of end all and be all. That's one trail of thought and one kind of line of reasoning amongst the classical scholars. And that's like the majority understanding. There are some explanations about aql being this ability just to understand, this ability to be able to grasp ideas, to be able to differentiate between that which is harmful and beneficial. So if we look at it from this perspective, anything which doesn't have a soul, that's why soul is the next point. The soul is perhaps the secret to everything. The soul is the secret. If we want to understand humans versus AI, it all boils down to souls. Artificial intelligence, anything that's made, any robots, no matter how sophisticated, no matter how strong, no matter how powerful, no matter how much they can process, they don't have a soul. Because the soul comes from Allah. Humans, we can't generate a soul. And it's the soul that gives life. And when there's a soul in the body, there's bioelectricity. And when a person dies and his soul departs, the bioelectric function ceases. So it's the soul that powers the body. But when the soul leaves, the body has no power left. The battery's dead. So it's literally the soul is the battery to the body. And that's why the soul is the only thing which really differentiates us. When you're thinking deeply, it's the soul. It was a soul that kept you alive before you came in this world, and it's a soul that will keep you alive after you leave this world. So from a metaphysical kind of perspective and an Islamic theology perspective, humans will always be superior from that perspective. In that we have a soul. AI will never have a soul. And then it's all about, because the soul has permanence and life because of Allah, it's that which will go to the hereafter. And that's why this taklif or this responsibility upon humans based on the soul. So AI, no matter how sophisticated, he has no aql in the way scholars have understood aql to exist. He has no soul. He can never have a soul because we can't. A soul it's an amr, it's a command of Allah which we don't understand. Allah has not given us the details, but it's this bioelectric force, it's this energy which Allah has put in the body. When the soul is there, the body functions. When it's gone, it doesn't function. And one last point I just want to mention here is just because you have something potentially better and stronger than humans, or that seems to be reasoning more than humans, it doesn't mean anything because there are creations in the world which are far better than humans in different things. For instance, animals, you have cheetahs and different animals which are faster than humans at running. You have animals which are stronger than human beings. You have elephants, for instance, bigger, stronger. So we have things which are faster than us, stronger than us, bigger than us. These are animals, and humans are scared of these things. Although humans possess aql. So just because there's something that exists better than humans in one aspect, it'll never be better than humans in all aspects. Humans are humans from a Sharia perspective because they've accepted the trust from Allah, the Amanah from Allah, in understanding revelation and understanding Allah. And that's what fundamentally makes humans different. Then the question, like, this is something from my thesis, right? I'm just sharing with you like a snapshot from my thesis is, if we took all the different explanations and understandings of aql from a Sharia perspective, like I mentioned, there's two lines of inquiry when it comes to aql. Although my personal inclination is towards the first, which is the majority, and the soul being, aql being to recognize Allah. That's its core function and purpose. It's got nothing to do with being able to do maths or anything sophisticated in this world. But if you were to take everything into consideration, how would we understand AGI and ASI, your artificial general intelligence and artificial superintelligence? What if we had a robot? That's the real question. How would we deal with a robot? How should we understand it from a Sharia perspective? Then, if you take the first approach where you say a soul is necessary for aql, you have to have a soul. Anything which doesn't have a soul can't have aql. And of course, even though something might have a soul like an animal, it doesn't mean he has aql. Animals, from a Sharia perspective, don't have aql. They have a function or faculty called tamiz in Arabic. Tamiz is this ability to simply distinguish between benefit and harm at its kind of like uh, at its level without being too sophisticated. That's why animals can't do sophisticated things because it doesn't have aql. It has tamiz, but it doesn't have aql. These are Arabic terms which are technical terms with a lot of technical kind of like understandings to them. But for humans, if we're saying that it's necessary, aql, it can only be restricted to humans, then one kind of approach to understand AI and all forms of AI is what I call the neutral tool model. AI is simply a neutral tool. It's a neutral tool. It's as good as your phone. It's as good as your software. It's good as your Word document. Nothing more, nothing less. It's a technology. Ibaha, permissibility is the asal, default. It's the way you use this, the way the information you feed into it and what you do with it defines its kind of Sharia compliance. That's the first approach. If you were to take the other approach, if you take these types of or these lines of inquiries where the thought is aql is not something which is restricted to humans, and it's not just to do with recognizing Allah, rather it's about being able to understand things and make sense of things and give outputs and just be able to reason regardless of how the reasoning is happening. Because the argument is, well, humans are using this these neurons and this kind of neural network in their mind. AI is simply doing something, but it's artificially done, but it's something similar. Who cares about how it's happening in the back end? The result is almost identical, and the result might be better. So that kind of questioning exists among some people are making those arguments. And if you go down that line and you say aql is simply about being able to reason at a sophisticated level like humans, then you fall into this territory now where you have to now start thinking about what it means for AI and our existence. How do we understand a robot then? So you then perhaps fall into three camps. And this is based on the progression of AI. Either you say it's like animal-like model where AI is not as sophisticated, it's premature in its kind of like judgments. Then it'll progress to an infant-like model where an infant has aql from a Sharia perspective, but not complete. An infant, in fact, the scholars, when they write about aql, they mention a baby, when a baby is born, has no aql whatsoever. This 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 faculty of aql, it doesn't exist in a baby. It exists in an infant and a child, but partially. And only when they're adults is it complete. That's why the Sharia rulings don't apply to an infant, because aql hasn't been transformed. They are not able to reason to the level which Allah wants us to be able to reason, to understand what the truth is, and then to act accordingly. So they don't have the faculty to be able to understand the reality, but only adults do. So if a person goes on this route and starts thinking of artificial intelligence being human-like, and they are of the view that aql is not necessary, or aql can go beyond humans, if they go down this kind of what some scholars have suggested, that aql is just about being able to understand and nothing to do with this light, or they don't negate that, but they don't mention it either. Then you're left in this kind of territory where in that phase, in that mode, then it gets scarier, because the question of liability comes in. The question of governance then is far more important there. And hence the next slide, just some Sharia considerations that I just wanted to present, that whenever you're building AI models, whenever you're doing any of this kind of like development, what are the kind of key things that need to be considered? From a Sharia perspective, the first thing is data reliability. Not only does the data have to be Sharia compliant, meaning you can't be feeding lies, you can't be feeding things which are inaccurate. That's a form of lying as well, because this machine will be creating outputs based on your lies. So you're feeding lies into the machine. So it has to be authentic and reliable. Your data has to be, on top of that, free from biases. You can't be misleading in your data. Further, your data has to be, as I'll mention in the next slide, the way your data is sourced is just as important from a Sharia perspective. That's one. Your algorithms. Your algorithms, what they are, what they do, yeah, there has to be an analysis from a Sharia compliance perspective. Your code, your objectives, all of that has to now be reviewed. There's a Sharia screening at an algorithmic level. What is the algorithm doing? What is it? Is it processing something non-compliant? Is it there to give a computation of something which doesn't align with Sharia principles? Is it harming people? Then number three, deliberate corruption of the learning process. What if people distort? Well, whilst you're training, so you have your algorithm in place, you have your model built, but once you're training the model, you're training it over and over again. What if intentionally you're distorting the training phases? That there's a Sharia compliance element there also. Number four is your intent-based design. What are you deploying and what are you doing? What's the purpose of this artificial intelligence overall? Let alone the algorithm and the computation, but overall, what is this being made for? There'll be a Sharia screening for that as well, to tell you whether it's worthwhile or this type of model is acceptable or not, whether it's beneficial or not. And then finally, deployment. Where is it being deployed? How is it being deployed? How is it being manipulated? How is it reacting with people? All these types of things will have to be considered from a Sharia perspective. And hence, the kind of framework that I present in my thesis is like rests on like six kind of like pillars. Number one is resource governance, which is about, as you know, artificial intelligence rests heavily on the chips that are driving the power behind AI. The software is dependent upon hardware, and the hardware is on all these like lithium and all these different materials and metals that are existing. And there's for titanium or cobalt, all these minerals and all these metals, which there's a race for, because the more resources you have, the more you can scale and the more power you have. The software is not just about the software and training the software, but it's really about the resources and the hardware, building that scaling that to be able to have more power, to be able to faster operations. So from a Sharia perspective, there's an entire governance requirement, and this not only from a Sharia perspective, just globally there should be, on how this is sourced. Your child labor, your theft, is it being unjustly enriched? How are people and how are we extracting these resources from the earth, or even beyond? Even beyond, if we go to other planets and start taking their resources, or the resources of another a planet, how is that being acquired? That's a question from a Sharia perspective and from a governance perspective. Your data integrity, which we talked about earlier, like no lies, no misrepresentation, no false accusations. Is it all lawfully acquired or not? Your model ethics, it's a whole other part of governance. We want to have a model which is transparent and explainable. It should be transparent. For an audit, it should be transparent. It should be explainable. You should be able to explain why what's happening. You can't just have algorithms giving you or doing things in a black box, which is not visible to people. That wouldn't work from a governance perspective. Deployment oversight. We need to be able to understand what purposes AI is being deployed for. How, where, why, what, all of these things. So it'll be like a Sharia screening from a business activity perspective. Operational accountability. What will happen very soon, what I feel, based on the different kind of readings and things that are happening in industry, there'll be an AI policy for most institutions. You might even have like you have a CTO and a CSO and a CEO, COO. You might have a CAIO, right? You'll have an officer for AI in your firm, and there'll be requirements having an AI policy on how AI is used, deployed. It's kind of like explainability, it being transparent, and that will be subject to audits. So that's like can happen very soon. Like, it's not something in the distant future. So there'll have to be some kind of operational accountability of how AI models are used. There'll be AI policies, and there'll be uh, a requirement for capacity building then, which is training and educating staff and stakeholders on the deployment of AI and the use of AI. And that really then brings me to the end of my presentation on AI. I'd just like to pause here. Maybe we got 5-10 minutes at the most. I can just go through perhaps some questions if there are any. And let's see what we can go through, inshallah.
Thank you very much, Mufti Faraz. I think that was very, very enlightening, I must say. Very, very deep in terms of where you're coming from, and then bring in a Sharia flavor to overall governing the use of AI. And the default mode or default stance, as you said, is artificial intelligence is allowed. It's where we use this artificial intelligence, where do we put it up to use, that defines either it is permissible or impermissible. So I think you alluded to the screening side of it as well. But thank you very much. I think that was very, very, very resourceful. It needs, far more detailed discussion if you have to go into any deeper into it. But let's in the interest of time, let's look at some of the queries or questions that have come in, or perhaps there are some comments as well that have come through. So I'll take it. If there are any further questions, please do add to the Q&A tab or raise your hand if you have to ask by voice. So I'll read out the first question. I think there are a few people who have asked if this session is being recorded. It is being recorded and it will be put up on BIBF YouTube channel. I've actually shared the YouTube channel link as well here. Okay, so Thomas Raj says, and I'll read out the question. Can we cover AI through the lens of Islamic ethics in terms of how much we can trust the solutions it offers as authentic and in line with prophetic tradition? Basically, can we trust these bots, or am I overthinking it?
Yeah, a very good question. And look, this is something which I didn't really touch upon. I was hoping somebody asked that question. That's the intention. I left it out. Look, people are relying upon ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, and other models to get responses on Sharia matters. It's becoming common. And that's very dangerous because we know AI hallucinates. It's very common. I mean, ask it a verse of the Quran. Uh, I remember doing a little experiment and just made up narrations of hadith. Just made it up. Doesn't even exist. So you have to be very careful. Your knowledge should still be gained. Knowledge is not just information. This is the most important thing for us to take away here. Knowledge, in terms of practicing Sharia in Islam, it's not just information. You don't just want to know, okay, how many cycles or rak'at are there in Dhuhr Salah? That's not the question. That's something you can learn from anywhere. You can even type that into whatever. But when we talk about knowledge, knowledge is about practice. And practice needs analysis of a human being because humans can understand your context. So when you are receiving a response, it has to come from a scholar who's trained, who understands who has the experience. AI doesn't have that experience. It can't have that experience. Experiential learning is in humans only. So we need to be able to, and we should only go to scholars when it comes to our Sharia matters, detail matters, even like it's from an Islamic finance perspective. Uh, Most of these models are perhaps very shallow and unhelpful. If you ask anything about Islamic finance, it'll just tell you the same stuff. Oh yeah, there's no riba, gharar, and maisir. It doesn't do more than that. But Islamic finance is so much more there to it. So you really need to be able to engage with scholars. Perhaps if scholars develop some AI models to help scholars answer, perhaps that might be useful. Or the simple questions a model can perhaps resolve. But for the most part, these models cannot be trusted for Sharia matters. It hallucinates over and over again. And not only that, answers require context. This is where the scholar's lens is so important. The answer in text might be one thing, but as far as practice is concerned, it's something else. This is extremely important to understand. The answers our scholars give, it's not always found in textbooks. It might not always be what the text is, but it could be customized, it could be tailored, it could be based on another kind of like principle or another overarching idea or maxim that the maxim will be guiding the scholar to a particular direction. That is not grasped by an AI model. It can never be grasped by an AI model. Hence, you trust only when it comes to these types of Sharia matters, scholars. And yes, there may be AI models in the near future which are helping scholars, and the model will be trained on you're collecting references from books, like how you have in from a research perspective. There's models there now helping scholars or professors in their research. There are models now in the pipeline which are going to be helping scholars in their research with Sharia texts. That's already in the pipeline, it's happening. But that again it should be used and handled with care because these things can hallucinate.
Thank you very much. I think I think you've already answered the next question as well, but I'll read it out from Brother Khalik. It's very insightful based on the Sharia considerations. Systems such as ChatGPT can't be used for Sharia uses unless output critically analyzed by scholars. Rather, I think that was a comment more than a question. So I think that you've already answered that. So I'll just go into the next one. Beside the considerations, have you developed a Sharia theoretical model for AI that can be used in academia? Not sure.
No, that's I think that's next on the list. Yeah, to do that. I mean, as I mentioned, these things have to happen with. I mean, the cost of creating a model, first of all, it runs into the hundreds of thousands. The cost is it's very resource heavy and intensive to develop these models and to even train them and maintain them at that standard at this current time that we're living in, because the barriers are still high. As this gets more kind of like scales more, the barriers to entry will be lowered, and then you'll see many more models appearing. But there is definitely a need to create these kind of Sharia models to assist in research.
There's another comment from perhaps I think the question is not very clear. Is there any indication clearly mentioned in Sharia books, like any fixed scholar mentioned it? Please share the book name if possible. Not sure what. Farhan, I think you'll have to explain your question. Mufti, we've got few hands raised. Maybe if you can take at least one question, if that's okay.
Yeah, let's just take one from the hands and then
Yeah. Brother Muhammad Yusuf, you're also allowed by voice, so you can unmute yourself and ask the question.
Well, Assalamu alaikum, Brother Faraz.
Walaikum salam.
Yeah, so directly coming to the question here. So we are working on a startup company. It's called Listen AI. So what we're doing here is, I'm just adding to the question what was asked by the previous person related to the answering the question asked by a person by the AI model. So what we have done is to avoid the hallucination, we have trained our model in a way where the answers are pulled. I want to keep it very in a simplified manner. Answers will be pulled directly from the book itself, from that book context for that particular topic. So for educational purposes, we are building it at a scale, at a global level, where we are going to develop a massive library in this way, where each and every book will be able to answer the question from the book itself. So we have reduced significantly the hallucination effect from that model. So this is how we are tackling this issue, and to keeping it to the point to the students. And rest, we are giving a disclaimer to go ahead and connect with the teachers or the scholars for whatever field they are specializing in.
Yeah, that's Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much for contributing there. That's something that I've seen, and I know another team developing something very similar to this, and they're doing the same thing. What they're doing is putting recommendations in that in your area, these are the scholars available, and these are their contact details. So for a more contextual answer and the gain confirmation, reach out to so and so.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. So brilliant. I mean, brilliant. Keep working on that, and it's good to hear of your efforts.
Okay,
Thank you.
wonderful. Thank you very much, Brother Muhammad Yusuf. I think that's very relevant. I think that unfortunately we're running out of time, so we won't take any more questions. But rather, just a comment. I think the use of AI has been significant within the industry as well. I mean, we have seen its use in different shape and form. Its use when it comes to looking at, for example, just by way of example, looking at AOP standards and bringing in the relevant clauses or clauses about a particular product or particular contract from different standards is something that has become almost like a norm. That's one. Plus, I've seen people, a team of brothers building, Sharia audit framework with the help of artificial intelligence. That is again looking at different, the Sharia audit frameworks based on the organization framework, plus the Sharia rules and regulations that have been defined very well within the institutional framework as well. Plus, if we are to add the AOP flavor into it, so the overall program will actually review or scan against all the different checks that have been built based on the underlying BP standards, regulations, country level, and as well as institutional framework. So the use has been great within the industry so far. It's very interesting to see where it will lead us going forward. Automation is certainly there to disrupt the industry, and it is certainly happening within the Islamic banking and finance industry as well. And I'm sure Mufti you are helping some organizations develop these frameworks as well. So we see huge potential within this space, and I think the upward trajectory from that perspective is very much there. And of course, we have to be mindful of the correct use of it and ensuring that when we put in a resolution or when we try and summarize something, it is based on the authentic text from that perspective, and not just something that has been picked up. And that is something what Mufti Faraz has alluded to through this presentation, that authenticity of the information is very, very important as part of the 5 principles he mentioned. I think there's a great use of it in different disciplines, be it the academia, be it the banking industry, be it the asset management industry, or as well as the research. Great work has been done, and of course, I think a lot more is underway as we speak. So, in the interest of time, I'll have to, bring the session to conclusion. I think we have, benefited a lot from the insightful discussions and insightful session that we have that was provided by Mufti Faraz Adam. I think, inshallah, we hope that once your PhD is completed, we will hear more about some of the outcomes, inshallah. I would like to thank you very much for sparing your time and joining us, for this very enlightening discussion and, sharing. I'm sure this would have been, a lot of hours have been put in to put together this presentation as well. So I'm very, very personally thankful for you spending the time to put together the research, as well as to join us for the session. And inshallah, we look forward to having you in the future sessions as well on other topics of interest. And I would like to thank our brothers and sisters who have joined us from different parts of the world. We had an overwhelming registration of about 800 plus people registered for the program, and about, I think, 300 roughly joined us live on the session. I'll repeat myself, the session will be uploaded on BIBF's YouTube channel, so please feel free to look through that, or refer it to your friends and network for their benefit. The aim of these series of events is basically just to enhance understanding or knowledge on key topics within the global Islamic banking and finance industry, and nothing else. If you're interested in any capacity building programs, short-term, long-term, or professional qualifications, you may want to reach out to us through our website, bibf.com, or islamicfinance@bibf.com, whichever works for you best. So I want to thank you once again, everybody, for spending your time and joining us. And please join us, in the future sessions as well. These are part of the monthly series that we'll have again next month as well. So with that, I thank you very much, everybody. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you, Sheikh.